So back in late 2025, the Kano State Police Command put out this big security report. They were pretty proud of it, hailing it as a huge success in cracking down on crime. But you know how it is with numbers. Do they really tell the whole story? Let's dig in and find out.
Right off the bat, they hit us with this massive figure, 3,081. That's the total number of suspects they arrested across all 44 local government areas in the state. And you have to admit, on the surface, that is a seriously impressive number. It makes it sound like it was a year of nonstop, intense police action.
And, well, that's exactly the story they wanted to tell. The police basically said, look at all these arrests. This is proof that our operations brought a new wave of peace to Kano. But is it ever really that simple?
Now, to give them credit, you have to appreciate the scale of what they did. The report wasn't just a simple press release. It covered operations across 78 police divisions and 7 different tactical units. This was a really comprehensive statewide effort.
And it's so easy to see why people would look at this and think, wow. I mean, you've got thousands of arrests, weapons seized, drugs taken off the street. It really does paint this picture of decisive, effective action. It looks like a huge win. But here's where the plot thickens. When you start to actually break down that big, impressive number, a very, very specific pattern starts to emerge.
Okay, take a look at this. It's kind of wild. A whopping 76% of all arrests, that's 2,350 people, were for something called thuggery. Now that's a pretty broad term, often used for street-level stuff. Compare that to just 5% for armed robbery or a tiny 2% for kidnapping. It's crystal clear what the police were really focused on: street-level disorder.
And that just raises a huge question, right? Is this focus on thuggery because that's the biggest crime problem in Kano? Or does it reflect a certain kind of policing strategy, one that gives officers a lot of room to decide who to arrest? What are we not seeing in this picture?
And that question leads us right to the heart of this whole thing. Because for all the numbers the report gives us, it's what the report doesn't say that might be even more important.
This slide just lays it out so perfectly. We know there were over 3,000 arrests, but we have no idea where most of them happened. We know weapons were recovered, but we don't know where they came from. We know 14 victims were rescued, fantastic news, but were these arrests directly connected to those rescues? And maybe most importantly, without any data from the year before, how can we possibly know if crime actually went down?
And look, these aren't just small details we're nitpicking. If you don't know where arrests are happening, you can't tell if police are targeting actual crime hotspots. If you don't track the source of weapons, you'll never know if you're disrupting the big organized gangs. And without that year-on-year comparison, the claim of reduced crime is, well, it's just a claim. It's not a proven fact.
But you know, there's an even bigger piece of the puzzle missing from this report. It's not about the where or when of the crime, but about what happened after the arrest. And this gets to a really fundamental point. So you have to understand this distinction. The report is chock full of police activity. It's a long list of all the things the police did. But what's completely missing are the justice outcomes. That is, what did the court system actually do with all these cases? Think about it this way. An arrest is just step one. It's the beginning of the story. For justice to actually happen, that suspect needs to be formally charged, they have to go to trial, and a verdict has to be reached. The data trail we get from the Kano police report, it stops dead at step one. And this, right here, is the absolute key. Out of all those 3,081 arrests, we have zero public information on how many of those people were ever charged with a crime, how many were convicted, how many cases were thrown out. The report is completely silent on the entire judicial process. All right, so let's try to pull all this together. After going through this very detailed but also very incomplete report, what can we actually say for sure?
Well, first, you can't ignore the human side of this. When you have mass arrests for a crime as vaguely defined as thuggery, it immediately raises red flags for community groups about things like youth profiling and wrongful arrests. This kind of heavy-handed policing can really damage the trust between communities and the police, the very trust you need to keep people safe.
Now, what the data absolutely confirms is this. The Kano police were incredibly busy in 2025. There's no doubt about it. They ran operations all over the state. They made a ton of arrests, and they recovered a lot of illicit items. That part is undeniable.
But, and this is the real bottom line, these numbers don't prove that all that activity actually led to less crime or to better justice. The evidence for that conclusion, it's just not in this report.
So it leaves us with this final, critical question to think about. When we're trying to figure out if a place is secure, what should we be measuring? Should we count the level of police activity?
Or should we be looking for the actual impact on crime and justice in our communities? And ultimately, which one of those truly makes people safer?